Hello, this is your host Ryu. Today we'll be discussing the Thor vs Vegeta death battle, and giving a more accurate analysis on the character's stats and what would honestly happen on paper if they battled. First and foremost, we need to talk about the bad power scaling they did for Vegeta. They outright mentioned that Goku absorbed Super Saiyan God into his base form at the end of his fight with Beerus, thus making his base form scale above his original Super Saiyan God state in Battle of Gods. Despite this, they start their scaling for Vegeta with his Super Saiyan God form being equal to Goku's Super Saiyan God form from the Battle of Gods arc. This is a clear issue since Vegeta is consistently comparable to Goku in power while they're in the same state, and both his and Goku's base form scale far above Super Saiyan God Goku from the Battle of Gods arc. So in reality, even if you use Death Battle's analysis for the size of Universe 7, base form Vegeta would be above the 13 times universal level that they set Super Saiyan God Vegeta at. It's like a repeat of the first Superman vs. Goku video, where they made Super Saiyan Goku a lower speed than base Goku and screwed their entire analysis. So if we want to rectify this rectum of a scaling chain, we have to start out scaling base Vegeta above the 13 times universal marker. Even if we ignore Vegeta's training, Zenkais, and limit breaks, which can in some cases be quantified, and would make this number vastly larger, and only use his multipliers from his transformations, we would wind up running 13 times universal for base form, 650 times universal for Super Saiyan, 1300 times universal for Super Saiyan 2, and 5200 times universal for a hypothetical Super Saiyan 3, because of course Vegeta doesn't use Super Saiyan 3. Beyond this, we don't know the multiplier for Super Saiyan God, just that it's a vast increase from Super Saiyan 3. So we'll be conservative and use a 2 times multiplier for it, making it 10,400 times universal using Screw Attack's numbers. Super Saiyan Blue is explicitly stated to be a transformation into Super Saiyan while being a Super Saiyan God, thus it would be a 50 times multiplier just like Super Saiyan, and result in 520,000 times universal power based on Screw Attack's numbers. And then Super Saiyan Blue Evolution is shown to be on par with Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken times 20 in the Tournament of Power. So a 20 times increase makes sense, resulting in it being 10,400,000 times universal. As far as Ultra Ego is concerned, it is again an unknown multiplier. I don't know why they stuck a 20 times multiplier into it. So if we're conservative and just give it a 2 times boost, it results in 20,800,000 times universal as its base power. This is over 8.7 times the number that Screw Attack calculated for Thor. So even by using their own numbers for the size of the universe in Dragon Ball, Vegeta would have a significant advantage in power, and would even be comparable to a Thor with a 10 times boost in his Warrior Madness state that they mentioned as well. Now that we have corrected Screw Attack's scaling, we can get into the relevant points. As far as their go-to moves and abilities, they're fine. Neither can use exotic hacks aside from maybe Vegeta's Hakaya technique and Spirit Fission, which were covered adequately. But as far as their raw power goes, we have to establish a couple things. First off, Death Battle's numbers are actually irrelevant for the most part. Sure, the Marvel Universe is at least 1 trillion light years across, and the Dragon Ball universe seems to be much bigger than our own. However, they got the structure of the Dragon Ball universe all wrong, and the volume of one Marvel universe becomes irrelevant when talking about these characters at their peaks.
Now, when looking at standard Thor, his power fluctuates significantly from story to story and writer to writer, just like many comic book characters. We can, however, scale him on a higher end to Hyperion, who survived the destruction of 2 universes, which would put high-end base Thor at low multiverse level.
Let's talk about Rune King Thor. He's the strongest version of Thor that they mention, although they make little attempts to analyze him in this form. In reality, Rune King Thor has very little in terms of feats to go off. However, we can conclude that he scales above those who sit in the shadows. As far as they go, we know they vastly surpass Odin. Odin is a character who shook the 9 realms, each universal space-time continuums, by clashing with Surtur. He's been able to tear at the fabric of the multiverse in his battle with Seth, and has even extinguished the flames of creation, which were going to burn down the multiverse. For reference, the Marvel Multiverse and Yggdrasil specifically in its entirety, have infinite universal space-time continuum. Thor Force Thor would actually scale above even Odin, given he has the Odin Force as part of his power. Despite all this power, Odin fears those who sit above in the shadows, and they are regarded as gods of gods in comparison to Odin, vastly surpassing him in a similar manner to how he surpasses normal men. Furthermore, those who sit above in the shadows are stated to exist outside the realms of all realities, and to be the creators of the cycle of Ragnarok, which would imply heavily that they at least exist on a higher plane of existence than Skyfathers like Odin, which would make them at least the equivalent of fifth dimensional for transcending and existing outside an infinite fourth dimensional multiverse like is depicted with Yggdrasil. As for Rune King Thor's scaling, he is stated to have obtained power to know the past, control the present, and guide the future, with which he terrifies those who sit above in the shadows, destroys the loom of fate along with those who sit above in the shadows, and breaks the cycle of Ragnarok. This comfortably scales him above those who sit above in the shadows and into at least fifth dimensional power. Now, worth noting is that some people draw comparisons between those who sit above in the shadows and the Beyonders, since Loki said they have similarities. However, that was unconfirmed speculation on Loki's part, and in no way did he say that they are Beyonders. Also, those who sit above in the shadows have no further proof of being related to the Beyonders, and lack anything close to their level of feats. Therefore, this is an unsubstantiated theory and nothing more. Now we move on to Vegeta. First thing we have to establish is the structure of Universe 7, which Goku can destroy in the Battle of Gods arc, and is the baseline for much of the power scaling in the series. First, we have to address the fact that Universe 7 is not a single spacetime continuum. It is composed of multiple spacetime continuum. This is outlined in guides such as Daisenshu that state the living world is split into two dimensions, the Demon Realm and the Universe. This indicates that both the Demon Realm and the Universe as we know it are each their own separate dimension or spacetime. By extension, this makes Otherworld a separate dimension from the living world as well. We see further evidence when Goku states that time runs differently in the Otherworld, and that this is why Super Saiyan 3 takes so much more energy in the living world. This demonstrates again a difference on how time functions and a separate spacetime between Otherworld and the living world. We can also see such a discrepancy between the Room of Spirit and Time and the normal universe, where again, time explicitly flows differently, and is considered a separate spacetime. We also know that it is normally impossible to travel to the Otherworld unless you die or can teleport like with instant transmission, further implying it to be a separate spacetime. Beyond this, in the Dragon Ball Z anime, Elder Kai directly refers to the living world as the temporal realm, further backing up the notion that it has a separate spacetime different from the Otherworld. In fact, although it's non-canon, in Dragon Ball GT, Seguro space is referred to as a space between dimensions, again confirming that the Otherworld and living world are separate dimensions / spacetimes. Furthermore, we have statements from Daisenshu guides that the living world's universe is the only one that runs with similar physics to our own. The other dimensions, like Demon Realm and Otherworld, seem to run more like magic, and have a different set of physical laws than the living universe, further demonstrating that they are in fact separate and different space-time continuum. So at the end of the day, Universe 7 as a whole consists of at least a separate space-time continuum for the living universe, Demon Realm, Otherworld, and Kaioshin Realm, as well as the Room of Spirit and Time, although that's stated to be the size of Earth, so it's not as relevant as the others. Now that we have established that Universe 7 is actually made of multiple space-time continuums, the question becomes what is the size of these dimensions? And that answer is infinite, aside from the Room of Spirit and Time, which is explicitly the size of Earth. We can confirm this from Daisenshu 4, which states the universe is an infinite space filled with light and darkness, and that it stretches out to infinity. We can see this reiterated again when they say it is infinitely expanding as well in the guide. Furthermore, the Daisenshu also states that the universe is an endless expansive space, and that the galaxies exist infinitely in the universe. Beyond this, the narrator in Dragon Ball GT states that there are boundless galaxies in the universe. Finally, even Koyama confirms multiple times that the universe, hell, and Otherworld in general are all infinite in size. Of course, Koyama being the screenwriter and an editor for the original Dragon Ball Z anime and all the original Dragon Ball Z movies. So it is very clear that the Dragon Ball's living universe, as well as the Otherworld and Kaioshin realm, are all actually infinite in size. Now on to the meatiest part of the analysis. That, of course, is higher dimensional structures in Dragon Ball. This one has evolved considerably in the last couple years, and at this point we have multiple pieces of convincing evidence to support that the Universe 7 structure is not simply a set of universal space-time continuums. It is, in fact, a higher dimensional structure in Otherworld. Our first piece of evidence comes straight out of Daisenshu, where it is stated that Otherworld is a supernatural world that transcends dimensions which cannot even be perceived from the human world. Beyond this, we have direct quotes from Takeo Koyama, a screenwriter for the Dragon Ball Z anime and the creator of the stories for the original 13 movies of Dragon Ball Z, that not only is the universe infinite in size, but a higher dimensional structure that transcends space and time. He goes further into depth, stating that while the living universe, like we know it, only contains 3 spatial dimensions, Hell is a 4th dimensional structure, with the remainder of Otherworld being a 5th and 6th dimensional plane. This places Universe 7 in its entirety firmly at least 6th dimensional structure. If you accept Word of God statements, then this is an objective fact, and very specific numbers were given, which is substantiated by the Daisenshu itself, claiming Otherworld to be a higher dimensional structure. Of course, Goku being able to destroy such a structure in Battle of Gods, explicitly including Otherworld and Kaioshin Realm, results in base Goku by the end of Battle of Gods, and anybody who scales to him having at least 6th dimensional power. So what is the takeaway from this? Well, if you use any sort of dimensional or higher reality tiering analysis, then Vegeta, even in base form, has at least 6th dimensional power, rendering him more than infinitely above 5th dimensional power, which is more than infinitely above 4th dimensional power, which is where the various standard multiversal levels lie at, including the power to destroy infinite universes. I will do a video discussing higher dimensional natures in the future and why this is the case, but that is a whole other can of worms we don't want to worry about right here. For those who don't take dimensionality into consideration, even though most people agree it is generally valid, the various space-times in Universe 7 are quite literally infinite in size. Therefore, going by just pure 3-dimensional volume, Vegeta has infinite power and can destroy multiple infinite-size realms in base form alone by scaling to Goku. Furthermore, if we ignore the higher dimensional statements, with the ability to destroy a low multiversal structure in base form, composed of multiple infinite universal space-time continuums, and the ability to multiply his power millions of times over or more, Vegeta would be a proper multiversal being anyway, easily passing the threshold of being able to destroy over 1,000 universes via scaling. Now, some people might argue that you can't quantify the difference between 2 space-times, therefore you can't apply multipliers. That would be true for a Universe Plus level feat, which only affects 1 space-time. However, Goku's feat is already affecting and destroying several separate space-times at once. Therefore, because it's a low multiversal feat we're scaling up from, the distance between universes has already been accounted for in that feat, and therefore we can reasonably apply our multipliers and place stronger characters or transformations, which are thousands of times stronger or more than Battle of Gods Goku, as having multiversal levels of power even as a super lowball. For the record, given Koyama statements, as well as Daisenshu substantiating them, and lack of real contradicting evidence, I consider Battle of Gods Goku and those who scale to be objectively at least 6th dimensional in attack potency. Now for speed. This is relatively simple compared to the power section. Thor scaling to somebody who can fight in a plank time is impressive and something I wasn't aware of myself until now. Although it does state that he fought in a plank length, the context of the quote clearly shows they meant plank time, as they were referring to a time frame and not a distance. So screw attack speed for Thor via scaling seems fine.
Although this calculation is rendered irrelevant, because the Marvel Universe has been stated to be infinite in size on multiple occasions, and Thor plus others who scale to him can cross universal distances in short periods of time. This gives Thor infinite speed. Beyond this, Thor can even move through time via flight as a side effect of swinging his hammer twice the speed of light, and battle beings like Silver Surfer who can do the same by flying extremely fast to warp space and time. It should be noted, though, that the nature of their time travel is explicitly born from being a side effect of moving faster than light speeds, and or bending time and space, and or using an alternate dimension to time travel, and it is a state that they must enter into as opposed to being naturally in. So they do not have complete transcendence over linear time all the time, just to a certain degree while time traveling.
As for Vegeta, the Dragon Ball universe is infinite in size, and we know both the attacks that Goku and Beerus were using, not just the shockwaves but several energy blasts too, could have crossed this distance in mere moments, and Goku would scale to the speed of his attacks. Furthermore, we have Pikkon and Base Goku cross Otherworld in a very short time frame to face Cell and Frieza, which is also explicitly infinite in size, again giving them infinite speed. So Vegeta clearly scales above both these feats and has infinite speed from them. Another feat worth mentioning is that when fighting Goku, Granola explicitly uses an attack after Goku disappears from using instant transmission, but before he reappears. Because instant transmission is instantaneous, this means that he fired his attack without any time passing, making it yet another infinite speed feat, which is consistent with the previous ones. One thing people may bring up is that the Earth was said to be on the edge of the universe in Dragon Ball Super. While at first this might seem contradictory to it being infinite in size, the fact is, we never actually see a termination point to the universe in its depiction during this scene. It's common for fiction to depict or describe infinite structures in a way that's comprehensible to the viewer, like when Wish shows the structure of the universes in a visual form, since you can't actually draw an infinite size object without representing it in some finite way. So simply having an edge or depiction for the viewer is not sufficient to refute the universe being called infinite in size multiple times by multiple sources. At best, it's an inconsistency with reality, like being able to move faster than light or talk in space. Furthermore, Hell and Otherworld are explicitly called infinite in size according to Koyama. Therefore, because Goku and Pikkon's feat of crossing Otherworld is based on Otherworld's size, and Goku's ability to use attacks which engulf all of Otherworld as well as the universe in his fight with Beerus include Otherworld's size, they would result in infinite speed regardless of if the universe is infinite in size, since Otherworld is explicitly also stated to be infinite by word of God from Koyama, with no contradictions. But beyond this, Goku was able to time travel into the future with pure speed in order to move inside and counter Hit's time skip. This is impressive because Hit's time skip functions as time travel into the future, where from everybody else's perspective, he disappears and reappears in the future, but from his own perspective, he can still interact with and attack everybody during the skipped time. With Goku traveling with him and being able to counter his attacks during his time travel, Goku achieved a form of immeasurable speed for being able to leave standard linear time and time travel into the future with Hit, countering Hit during his time skip. This would of course scale to current Vegeta, who has long since surpassed the Universe 6 tournament version of Goku. To further back up such speed, Beerus, Whis, and even Goku, if he had a Senzu Bean, were confident in their ability to defeat an omnipresent, infinite Zamasu, who had fused with the time and space of Trunks' future timeline. Although omnipresence itself is not a speed but rather a state of being, omnipresence over time and space functions in a similar manner to immeasurable speed, giving the being the ability to attack anywhere in the past, present, or future simultaneously. The ability to combat such a being, at least on paper, usually will require a form of immeasurable speed to avoid being bombarded across time and space simultaneously. So this does imply that Goku, Beerus, and Whis are capable of speeds that could combat such a being. Beyond this, we even have Goku and Hit confirm later that his time skip ability would no longer work on Goku, implying that such time travel skills would not be nearly as effective. Finally, we even have statements in the Tournament of Power that Jiren's power transcends time itself, and that time has no meaning to Jiren while he's fighting Hit. This just further solidifies that Dragon Ball characters have transcended traditional linear time, which fits with their feats and the higher dimensional nature of their power.
Worth noting is that I am aware you can make scaling chains for virtually any long-running Marvel character to claim that they scale to insane cosmic entities like Eternity, Living Tribunal, etc. However, these scaling chains abuse the transitive property a lot of the time, which several writers and editors for Marvel have outright said should not be applied. So I'm conservative when it comes to using scaling chains or abusing cosmology by assuming the largest scale for structures without explicit clarification on what's being affected. This is true especially in massive franchises with many writers like Marvel or DC. Unless a character at least somewhat consistently scales to a level, I consider it an outlier or inconsistent. A good example of this would be Spider-Man keeping up with Silver Surfer, and Silver Surfer keeping up with Hulk, and Hulk being able to rattle infinite universes in a one-off feat. Thus, using the transitive property, Spider-Man can rattle the infinite multiverse with his punches. It leads to a ridiculous thing like this when you indiscriminately scale with little or no regard for consistency. Reasonable scaling within the same arc and with characters that consistently show a level of power is okay. But creating chains that vastly inflate a character's stats beyond anything they have done or can't do 99% of the time is in my opinion dishonest in a VS analysis. There would be no point in ever debating Marvel Comics characters if we allowed scaling chains like this without considering consistency, since if you try hard enough, they would all be equal to beings like the Living Tribunal or Eternity, which is certainly not the intention of any person who has written them, and it's inconsistent as hell. So I want to make it clear that I do use the characters at their peaks, or in other words, their higher ends. However, I do consider consistency and major outliers and scaling chain abuse as well. So at the end of the day, we have Rune King Thor sitting atop the throne for the most powerful versions of Thor with a likely 5th dimensional level of power, and speed clocking in at infinite and sometimes immeasurable in his peak showings. Then we have Vegeta clocking in as a being with at least 6th dimensional power, even in base form, as well as multiple infinite and immeasurable speed showings and statements via scaling. So although the speed seems to be fairly similar with both having infinite and short-term immeasurable speed showings, Vegeta has a vast advantage in power, being more than infinitely above even Rune King Thor, making the clear winner of this battle Vegeta.